Hello, everyone. Welcome to the cert-manager steering committee inaugural meeting. We sort of designed the steering committee a while back, and it's taken a while to actually hold a meeting. The fact that we applied for graduation sort of lit a fire under us to actually get it going. And the aim of this is to work through the items that we have, which are in a meeting notes, which should be attached to this video, and also to sort of find out how this works and go forwards trying to improve it. I think we'll probably skip introductions. I think everyone here knows everyone else, and certainly the important people in this call are Eric and Spiros, who are steering committee members representing the cert-manager community here. Myself and Richard are both cert-manager maintainers, and Peter is actively involved with the cert-manager project in many ways and is excellent at a lot of the scheduling stuff that I know I'm not particularly brilliant at. We're hoping that Florian will join later, who is also a steering committee member. We'll see on that one. I happen to be the first thing on the agenda, which I will leap right into because we've got the roadmap planning coming later, which is something that is super important. Again, very relevant to graduation. I do want to spend most of the time on that. First, though, the thing that I added to the agenda here is it relates to the release cycle of cert-manager. So we currently say that we will do a release every 2 months. That hasn't been true for quite a while now. We've actually been releasing about every 4 months recently. The reasons for that have been to do with like KubeCon getting in the way, or public holidays that meant people aren't working. And just because as cert-manager the product has matured, there's less that goes into any given release, and we don't do there's not a pressing need. There's fewer and fewer like big features that people are demanding. We tend to have, as maintainers, we have more of a focus on stability and maintenance than on releasing new features. The maintainers have discussed already that probably codifying that 4-month release cycle and making that sort of the new official thing would be an easy change to make, because that's effectively what's happened anyway, and might better reflect reality, and it reduces our burden on doing releases, which obviously comes with a certain amount of overhead. The feedback among the maintainers from that was positive. I'm quite happy to, I don't remember anyone disagreeing with that as a concept. I wanted to raise it and bring it up with steering committee members because we'd like a community voice on it, and also obviously got one eye on sort of like the Linkerd thing that happened, and maybe changing releases is a little bit of a touchy topic, and we just want to be really open and transparent with everyone. Like, we're not going to change the type of releases that we do, we're just going to change the frequency of the major releases. Associated with that, we also intend to release alpha versions more regularly throughout the development cycle of any given release, so that people who are waiting for the next release will be able to test it and run it as soon as possible, really. That way we can sort of defer the big work of doing a actual minor release and do lots of alpha releases which people can consume and test themselves. That's the proposal, I guess. Does anyone have any comments on that? Any input?
I'm actually a bit surprised that you're heading for a slower release cycle, because I've been many times in situations where we're waiting for a particular feature, and even if you say that you will release alpha releases more frequently, I've been arguing a bit with my cluster admins regarding installing alpha releases in our cluster. So it might just be a question of how you note the release. Maybe a release candidate could be something to consider without any other differences, because I see the projects as quite mature, at least cert-manager, and you don't have any history for breaking things anyway. So, I mean, in the project I work on, we try to get into a state where we can release at any time from the default branch, which I think is a good goal to have anyway. And the release process should be as automated as possible, but of course it must be controlled in a way that doesn't break anything. but it should be fairly simple to create a release. So I'm more asking you maintainers, could it be simplified more? It seems like a burden to you to do releases.
I mean, that's totally fair. I think a lot of the work in doing a release now is around like release notes and getting things published in the right place and that sort of thing. The actual mechanics of doing a release are largely just we have a tool that does that. So we don't spend much time like uploading GitHub assets or anything like that. But what we do spend time on is with so many contributions coming in from different people, the release notes they put into their PR description aren't always like up to scratch, and they don't get reviewed, or there's just more and more stuff that we have to do to collate all of that stuff into a document. Obviously, a longer release cycle means there's more work to do when we actually do the release, but like it's about minimizing that pain throughout the year. Really, like I share the idea that ideally more frequent releases would be better. I guess we're also slightly concerned about like if we were to say double our release schedule and do one every month, like a lot of people don't seem to expect that. Like something that we hear from enterprise customers at Venafi, for example, is that people like don't upgrade that frequently, and they're not as on the ball. Like I think you are very on the ball, Eric, and many enterprises seem to be quite slow with it, and they almost sort of get paralyzed by the amount of work that it feels that they have to do these updates.
Okay, makes sense.
It's an interesting point about the naming. Like alpha obviously is a little bit scary to people. Maybe something we could think about.
Yeah, I mean, we could do like a nightly build, couldn't we? And put that somewhere for those people who know cert-manager well enough that they're willing to install that.
Theoretically, I don't see why we shouldn't be able to.
At least to get more testing of our releases, because I don't intend to put an alpha release directly in production, but we have early clusters that we can install it to and kind of test out new features and things that they have contributed to see if it works in the context that we have. I think that would be beneficial for the community and for the project overall to get more like real testing of the software.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem we've had is we release alpha versions and then nobody actually has ever run them.
Yeah.
The nightly thing is I've not really considered, but that is an interesting idea. I suppose if there's a new commit on master, a new commit shall then do a release based on it. Seems
it would work for us, I think, because then if we contribute something or there's a feature we're particularly interested in, we could install it in an early cluster to see how it works for us.
Yeah. That's definitely one to think about.
It doesn't sound much different to an alpha release.
It's not. It's just a naming thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's actually worse than an alpha release. It's less. But maybe what you're saying, Eric, is that the word alpha puts people off.
Yeah.
Even testing it, even installing it anywhere as a test it.
Yeah. And if you do something more official, I would suggest release candidate or something in that kind to encourage people to actually try it out.
Right.
Is there a potential chance that I'll start by saying I think that's probably a good idea. Like I think most people writing their own apps, or that I've experienced, basically build for master, right? You know, if it's in master, it should be live and they push it out essentially as like until they get mature enough that they need releases and they need to sync it with lots of other apps, and then they might evolve that a bit. But I might be wrong, but has there been sort of some changes recently? So Ash, I think when you maybe done a release recently, something had changed, a permission or like I'm just thinking nightly builds would be good, but I also don't want you to log in every day and be like, God, the thing's broken again, and I need to spend all day figuring out why and fixing that. Like, if we can do it without increasing your work burden in the long term, maybe initially, yes, long term, less burden.
Yeah. So the thing you're referring to was kind of a bit of a one-off, like everything going wrong because we did some infrastructure changes and other things that just got in the way. Like I was just the unlucky guy that hit them all. I think doing the real time sync at the moment is things like release notes and the sort of the song and dance that's the rest of it. If we allowed ourselves to sort of like be less hands-on with that stuff, and the nightly just had like whatever the PR release note said, and we don't try and augment it in any way, that does make it pretty simple for us to just sort of throw one over the wall and say, here it is, like no promises, but like this is that would basically be reflecting the state of the master branch, and then the effort of doing a release becomes like the website updates and the release note stuff that we do now, and we can push that pain down the road.
We already have some kind of nightly builds. I think I broke it last week by a PR. So just making it to a nightly release to make it available for end users should be a minor change.
Potentially, yeah, potentially. We have tests that build everything regularly as a side effect. Like all of that is very easy to do. It's very easy for anyone to build a cert-manager release.
On a different point in terms of getting people to use this, apart from Eric, I would say a large amount of cert-manager users would use the Helm release, and in order to go find release candidate releases or things that aren't main releases, they'd have to pass a flag. And is that just something to be aware of, a challenge type thing to? But I'm all in favor of make the release, but don't necessarily document it other than what's in Git until you have a release candidate where you then do the proper documentation. Because I would say that my first place for like kind of I need to upgrade something from here to there is the website, and I know it takes effort to get things from Git over there in a way that makes sense to people, and making things easy to read is also a challenge in itself. And there's lots of good people to review my terrible spelling as well, so I'm always thankful for that, by the way. Just get it in there.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I feel like what I'm taking away from this is to spend a bit more time thinking about that alpha stuff. I'm not sensing like a big opposition here to slowing the release schedule for official minor releases. I feel like that seems pretty cut and dry. But then maybe to investigate more on how we do the alpha releases, change that to nightly, change the naming, whatever. I think that's a useful discussion point that we can take away.
Good.
Brilliant. Is there anything more on that, or should we move on to the really important stuff?
The cert-manager website currently says that our supported releases, the support window is calculated based on 2 previous releases. So we might also, not to discuss now, we might have to think about changing that wording or changing the support window. Yeah,
I wasn't expecting that we would, to be honest. I don't think it's a particularly huge burden. There's been an uptick recently because obviously we have a long-term support version, which means we're doing 3 versions now rather than 2. But it's not been a particular burden as far as I can tell. And I think that the long-term support thing is a bit of it's its own thing in its own way. But yeah, certainly we should check.
The long-term support releases is something that you can put on the enterprise edition.
Yeah, like
in previous discussions we've had.
For sure, yeah. So to be clear, like the long-term support that we have at the moment is just because Venafi sponsored that. Like there's no, like we had no open source intention to do that, and all of the time to do that has been sponsored by Venafi, essentially just as a gift to the community, which is obviously lovely. But I don't think it's a thing that can be sustained going forwards for sort of all of the like future releases. There's no plans currently to do another long-term support release. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, but it is maybe another point that is worth discussing more.
I would rather see Venify support you guys working on the project itself instead of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a way of them doing that in a way, right? This like this like it works and everyone kind of wins out of it. But I guess what I'm saying really is this isn't necessarily a template for the future. This may well be a one-off, or it may not be, but like we'll see on what that ends up being.
I won't mention names, but I think other companies are using the long-term support releases.
Yeah,
like big companies.
I believe that to be the case. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, long-term support will continue for 1.12. That's for sure. Anything else on the release schedule? Okay, brilliant. Go on, Spiros.
It's
Did you have something?
excuse me.
Were you going to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything said already, so I don't have anything to add.
That's always good to hear. Thank you. So yeah, let's move on to the roadmap then, which is like super important. This was specifically called out as part of our kickoff meeting for graduation. We have this roadmap. It's not necessarily like it doesn't necessarily reflect the latest ambitions of the project or anything like that. And Katie, who is sponsoring graduation, was quite clear that like this is an important thing to end users, that they want to see a fair open source roadmap that represents what the project is actually going to do. And it's important to say as well that it doesn't commit anyone to anything. It doesn't mean that like something being on the roadmap doesn't guarantee it will be worked on, but it does lay out sort of the path forwards for us. It's a shame that Maël couldn't make it today because he is there's a public holiday in France, but he did a lot of work talking to Tag Contributor Strategy to find out more about what they think about this sort of thing. And it would be great for his feedback here as well. But what we would like to do is go through the roadmap, sort of see if there's anything in there that we just want to get rid of, see if we can update it now. And any feedback from you, Eric and Spiros, would be amazing. Sort of see where we get and try and get it into a happier place. We're not going to solve it all in this 1 hour-long meeting, but we are going to make it better, and then we can work on it more asynchronously. With that in mind, so currently the roadmap is in the cert-manager repo, which is here. One thing that we will do is move this to the community repo. The new one will be there. I'm guessing Richard just clicked on the wrong thing, and we'll be back in a second. There he is.
I did.
He left when he saw the roadmap.
I clicked the link and it didn't open a new tab. Sorry.
It's all good. So yeah, Eric, I see you've already done work on this, right? You linked to a paste bin earlier. Do you want to start off on this and say what you're thinking?
Yeah, I shared the link to my HackMD on the chat. I mean, I know Trust Manager pretty well, and I have some knowledge of cert-manager, but not at all features. So I went through some of the upvoted issues and tried to make some suggestions to things that we could eventually put on the roadmap in some form. So
this does look really useful for getting started with. So
it seems like a kind of a common pain point is that cert-manager and trust manager does not work perfectly together. There are some missing pieces there. Some of them which I think are quite easy to fix, while others are more complicated, like in the area of CI rotations. If you run some kind of private PKI, it would be very nice to have better support for rotations, but that would require more work, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that is sort of things working together better as sort of a suite of products is itself a laudable goal, right? Like a useful thing to everyone. That as an overarching theme, that's super useful. Did you say some of this was based off upvoted issues?
Yeah, I went through the development meeting last Thursday. Someone showed the upvoted sorted by thumbs up on cert-manager. I did the same on trust manager and kind of browsed through the first page just to see if there were some common denominators, and because some of the issues are partly duplicated, so they are in the same area.
Yeah.
So they actually are more upvoted if you kind of sum them up.
Is this something that stands out to you as like a number one priority in all this?
I'm not sure. The most upvoted there should be fairly simple and makes a lot of sense. That's just a good first issue, actually, to provide some kind of template feature on the config map and secrets that's provided by Trust Manager. I don't think it actually makes sense to put like minor things on that on the roadmap. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I kind of like the quote. So this is a document that Mayal had shared, which I'll add to our meeting notes right now. But the first thing on this is like a roadmap provides a clear vision and purpose for the project. So maybe the starting point is really high level. So like the clear purpose for cert-manager is what we say in release notes, which is like the easiest way to manage and automate certificate issuance in Kubernetes. Maybe having that line for every single sub-project is a useful thing as well. It occurs to me to say.
Agree.
I think I think maybe a slightly spicy thing relating to this is the extent to which we are prioritizing new features and things like that. Like certainly the way that cert-manager has been for a while now is that we've largely been focused on maintaining it and making sure it keeps on being stable and fixing bugs and things. There haven't been that many new features because largely we have extension points where people can do that in their own project and they don't need to wait for us to review things. I think there's an interesting point there about how we handle that and the extent to which we do want to add new things and like where we do add new things. And I think a roadmap maybe might contain that, but I don't know the extent to which we would be able to quantify like, oh, we're only adding big new things or we're only adding small things or whatever. I don't know.
What you're saying there takes me back to the release conversation in a way, as in why release every 4 months if there's no actual new feature to release? But at the same time, you've got bug fixes which you do want to release in minor versions. So like that, you've got different types of releases, I guess. Yeah, so that just came to my head. I don't have any decision on that. It's just kind of.
It's a fair point.
Sorry, I'll go to go back to Eric's sort of I'm going to go the condensation of features for the projects. It's probably not the right term, but perhaps a roadmap goal that kind of tackles some of this stuff is to make it easier for a platform administrator to effectively manage their PKI in Kubernetes environments. Because if I'm right in thinking, Eric, that you run platforms where you work, and Spiros, I don't know, but I'm just going to assume the same. And a lot of the times you want to automate something to stop or prevent your tenants from running into silly bugs that you know might happen because you've experienced it before, and now you want to kind of mitigate it in some way and just set some good practices and patterns. And that kind of aligns by bringing in what a proof of policy might be as a tool in terms of you've got issuance, you've got policy, you've got trust. There's like projects that come together. But maybe the roadmap goal is, or maybe that's too broad. I don't know. But that's a place to start as a. Although if anyone here claims to be the PKI security expert and says that actually no, we should just do certificate related stuff, then yeah. I don't think I think judging by the users we have, they tend to be platform orientated, and maybe aligning the roadmap to that would be nice.
Yeah.
It's a fair point.
We also have the multi-tenancy dimension in our platform, which is which complicates things a bit more. But as long as the tools kind of support a multi-tenant model, where kind of we provide the tools to our tenants that kind of controls what they're allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do, and do it quite simple, because there are some of our users are not skilled in Kubernetes at all. So
that's true across the board. You have a wide range of people using Kubernetes who have various levels of experience. So regardless of the companies. I
was going to say, I feel like I think in the spirit of focusing somewhat on the sort of core goal of cert-manager, I don't think we necessarily spend enough time on the Let's Encrypt ACME part of cert-manager, which is what so many people want to install it for. I feel like there's a lot of improvements we could make to the code to make it more reliable and so that users don't end up shooting themselves in the foot with Let's Encrypt, and helping users diagnose problems when they're using the Let's Encrypt issuer.
that's a fair point. I wish we could use Let's Encrypt.
It certainly seems like a thing that's worth capturing. Like, so if the average community member were in this call, if we created an average community member, I'm sure they would be interested in Let's Encrypt primarily, right? We know that that's by far the most commonly used.
Yeah, I think the most common case that someone has is like not being able to access the ingress to get the certificate verified.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I very much agree with that. Having gone through some of the recent issues and seen some of the recent things in Slack, that just keeps coming back. And to add to that, everyone seems to have a slightly different setup, because there is a lot of ingress controllers and a lot of clouds, a lot of areas to go wrong. It's kind of difficult to 100% guarantee it works with this, and this, because there's so many combinations of things you could have.
From looking at issues that people have, my experience is that it's usually related to non-cert-manager problems like network, DNS, all kinds of stuff in their infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
Oh.
that comes back to the concept that, you know, where people are using cert-manager who aren't necessarily experts in lots of areas, or even cert-manager for that matter, you know, and they might not even be running their own infrastructure, right? They might be they might not be quite the right person to be running cert-manager in the environment, but they might be proving out the concept. So you kind of, you know, different skill levels.
Do we provide any tools for kind of doing a pre-requirement check for using Acme with Let's Encrypt? That could make sense to kind of run this command, and we will check if you have a network is set up to actually use it.
It's an interesting feature idea. That would fit neatly in CM-Cuttle, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and like the larger point of making enhancing CM-Cuttle and providing more tools for the users to self-diagnose the problems that are common, and better documentation as well. I mean, just keep improving the documentation with real use cases explaining. Coming back to that item just saw earlier about how does one use cert-manager and trust manager in production, and how does one rotate the CA? What are the different strategies you can use for rotating the CAs in your infrastructure?
Should be fully automated, in my opinion. So there's that would be nice.
Yeah, I mean that is one, but I think that would be one strategy. I don't want to go into specifics, but my general point is more what's the word, like less generic. I feel like the cert-manager's documentation is much better than it was 2 years ago, but it's still somewhat generic and not. I think it could benefit from more real-world, opinionated use cases and tutorials. Also, the tutorials are terribly out of date, just updating everything and making it relevant again.
Yeah, because I think several people have had issues where they said, I'm following this guide from somewhere else, which is also out of date, or possibly out of date. You have no idea. But if we had something similar that we could point users to that was up to date, it might get us to find the issues first. Plus, it's kind of fun to try new clouds and things, right? So that's quite a nice thing for maintainers to do. Yeah, but if it would be nice to see everyone go, I followed this guide and got a problem, and it was the cert-manager official guide. You know, you get the wax seal of approval from cert-manager.
I'm definitely hearing documentation and tutorials as being a major focus for us. I suppose that comes under the banner of like making cert-manager the easiest way to manage certificates in Kubernetes. Like documentation is part of that. Sure. I'll capture that in the doc.
Is there any way we can get a sponsor for doing like some major rework of the documentation, improve the tutorials? You had around 2-3 years ago, I think there was a woman working on it.
Yeah, there was Google Summer of Docs. Am I remembering that correctly?
It's not called Google. It's just called the Season of Docs, but it is sponsored by Google. It was quite successful, Eric, but not as successful as we'd hoped.
It took a lot of maintainer time as well, right?
Yeah.
Like
It's such a niche technical topic that it's difficult to find a technical writer who can create satisfactory documentation.
Need to find an expert on cert-manager, which is also a technical writer.
Yeah, I think it's us. I think it comes down to us writing it with a technical writer, proofreading and pointing out inconsistencies in style and jargon and something that Benify. I think Benify could. Benify paid for us, the Benify cert-manager team, to work on the code. We have technical writers at Benify. I wonder if we could persuade them to direct some of those people's time to cert-manager's open source content.
I would be happy to make that case. Sorry, this probably isn't for this call, so I'll stop after very quickly. But I think there's some things that they are doing that are duplicating effort, and actually having a single source of that was upgraded because more time was spent on the original source or maintained, it would benefit everyone involved. There's like this benefit both ways there. So, yeah. Sorry, Ash, you linked to this was the roadmap doc that currently exists, right?
Yep.
This one here.
It's possible you might have read my mind, Peter, because I was actually going to suggest that we take a look at this on the call. I'm curious with the headings that we have here, if there's anything that we just want to get rid of or definitely keep or whatever. Like looking through this one at the top, integration with other projects in the cloud native landscape. For me, this isn't really a priority. I don't want to go out and find other projects to integrate with, but like I'd happily integrate with anyone if there's a purpose for it, but I'm not sure that this reaches the level for me personally of this should be like a roadmap level item.
I agree.
Are we happy to remove that?
Yeah, I think there are already a lot of cloud native tools integrating with cert-manager very well. So I don't think there's a lot more to do there.
Yeah, I feel like it's an easy one to get rid of.
Yeah.
Upstream APIs. Sorry, Peter, go on.
I was going to say what you're about to say probably covers it, but I was going to say you could reword that in maintaining a Kubernetes first approach to what we do deliver, so that it's easy for cloud native projects to extend upon it. But that kind of is covered by gateway API, just like sets, upstream APIs.
Again, this hints at like that tagline of cert-manager is the easiest way to manage and update certificates in Kubernetes. Like the Kubernetes part is important in that sentence. Adoption of upstream APIs, I feel like this is kind of always going to, like, it sort of extends that, doesn't it? It's always going to be a thing that we do. I'm not sure really if this is, again, something that reaches roadmap level, because we just obviously will. That said, trust anchor sets are a big part of the future of Trust Manager, I believe, and is that might guide us a little. I'm unsure if this reaches the level of roadmap, but it's at least it's certainly something we'll do. So it's no harm to have it on the roadmap.
No.
I think it's worth saying on the roadmap. From the other point of view, it's worth saying, if you don't say that you're gonna integrate with the upstream with the core APIs, someone might assume that you're not going to integrate with, say, the trust anchor set, which will be core. You're just kind of progressing. So I think it's worth having as a roadmap as like a high level item, and maybe it may be one of those things that says these are some examples of things we'd like to do now, but in the future it could be completely different, right? Because in 12 months' time there might be a whole new set of APIs to look at.
I can't argue with that. I think it's worth saying this in the roadmap for sure. Extensibility, I think, is something that we. I think is a goal. I'm not sure if the way this is written is quite right for me. Like, I think we want to provide extension points for cert-manager, and probably that's our primary way of adding new stuff. Like, we'd rather add an adapter that lets other people integrate better with cert-manager rather than adding loads to the core. This actually links in with the bottom point of the roadmap, which shrinking core, where we don't want to have like cloud-specific webhook providers in the core cert-manager code base, really, because it presents a maintenance burden for us. Like, I guess the bottom one is kind of redundant in that case, because we'd rather extend using the Kubernetes model where cloud provider stuff like plugs into the core component rather than having it in the core component itself. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I totally agree. I think we should try to reduce the core, and I mean, Kubernetes is working on the same thing. They added support for a lot of specialized things that they're trying to pull out.
I agree too. I would like to remove things from cert-manager, which separate parts out of the cert-manager Helm chart that they can be installed separately, and maybe reduce so that for example the person installing cert-manager, faced with this huge wad of RBAC that they've got to review, has less to worry about. They can install a minimal cert-manager with fewer required permissions.
Yeah.
Go on.
I'd suggest rather than say shrinking core, we reword this as, because it relates to this focusing on stability, security, like the core feature set. So, and I know to do that, you might want to move some of the sort of more specialist bits of code into their own components so they can be sort of. It also helps with releases, right? Doesn't it? Kind of goes back to the same thing. If you have a very core set of things that really don't go wrong, you don't have to release as often because you don't need to fix it. Yeah, but the wording, sorry, so shrinking core kind of maybe
Focus on the core.
I'm arguing with the wording. I'm going to shut up. I don't know what the word should be, but yeah, something about stability. I'm thinking of what Mail said at KubeCon and relating it back to that manager about, you know, stability, core product features and things.
It's like a mini.
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Spiros.
Like a minimal release.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. Yeah, definitely shrinking. Shrinking makes it sound like we're reducing our capabilities, and that really isn't the goal at all. Continuing on with these, we've got PKI lifecycle was the next one we've not talked about. And I know there was Tim, I think, wasn't keen on this being in the roadmap, but I can't really make his point for him. I personally am very interested in this, like from a academic angle almost. I'm very interested in this. Like, it's just the person that I am. I know, Eric, you're obviously somewhat focused on this as well. This is important to you.
It's very important. That's what we are missing. I mean, we have a lot of features, but we want more in this area.
What do others think? I'm conscious that I'm biased maybe on this one.
I think it's really important too. I feel like we've created cert-manager, but we've never spent enough time. Well, I think I've said it already in this meeting. They're just writing down how one should use it in real life in a production environment to not just creating your first Let's Encrypt certificate. It's about creating a whole PKI system for your organization. I'm waffling, but I think it's important.
Yeah, obviously I agree, but I am biased. I wonder if I guess my question on PKI lifecycle is whether it does deserve to be a roadmap level item. Like, I suspect it probably kind of is, but I'm really not sure.
I certainly think from the trust aspect that yes. But if you say life cycle, people might think about the revocation side of things, and I know that's an area that we've really sort of Ash gets his, tools out to defend against vampires. But yeah, I think we all agree on the trust side of things, as in your certificates are pointless without something to validate, what you trust, and that they're issued from places you do trust. So, and whilst the projects could have like their separate strap lines, easiest way to issue certificates, easiest way to distribute trust, perhaps the roadmap item is more along how those two things work together, creating a platform-friendly PKI experience in Kubernetes or something like that.
I would definitely love to have something in this area on the roadmap, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm quite happy to include it then.
I wonder what Tim has against this, but we can ask him next time we see him.
I suppose that this will lead to a PR where a new roadmap is presented, right? And obviously everyone on this call will be invited to review that. Everyone not on this call will also be able to review it, and we'll get input there. End user experience. This seems almost so core again that it doesn't. It almost seems hard to justify having it, because obviously we want a good end user experience. But what I'm noticing going through these is how much of them are caught by that line that we have, like cert-manager is the easiest way to manage certificates in Kubernetes. Like the end user experience comes into that as well, right? Like making it easy for people.
I'm not sure if this belongs on the roadmap, because it could be more like a vision. What do we think about the cert-manager projects? How should they be? This should have a nice end user experience and the bullets below it, but that's kind of something which is there and we will try to achieve over time, but it's not something we put extra focus on, something that we will develop or improve. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like a mission statement rather than a roadmap. But I think the roadmap used to be quite specific and have some concrete items on it. But then we realized we weren't doing the concrete things that we promised to do, so we made it more wishy-washy. So where do you draw the balance?
I'm hoping we could get more like frequent contributors, so the project is not so dependent on the Venafi employees over time. So that's something I would love to see. I mean, I've been trying to be a more regular contributor and be involved in the project. I would love to see more doing that.
Yeah, it can only be good for the health of the project and for everyone that uses it, right? Certainly that ties nicely to developer experience. The next on the list. I suppose again, it's more like a mission statement-y type thing, but like a focus on community. Like we're not aiming at any one company or any one particular deployment pattern. We want to support the needs of the community.
Yeah. Should we just move it to kind of a mission statement? Try to evolve that further.
Yeah.
For now, we just move some of the points over there because they're more natural in that context.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to get a picture of how this would end up looking. Certainly, from what we've just discussed, I think remove integration with other projects in cloud native, just to get rid of that entirely. There's a few mission statement-y type things, like we want to focus on upstream APIs, we want to focus on the community, we want to have a good end user experience and developer experience and encourage new contributors. That might be like a prelude rather than an actual roadmap. I think PKI lifecycle and improvements around that and trust are natural candidates for a roadmap. I think the discussion said.
Yeah, I think on this document, on the roadmap document, it would be natural to see an item that said a tight integration with trust anchor sets. And that's not we're not committing ourselves to any particular implementation, but that would be a concrete thing that we had on our roadmap. Is that how other people see this document? Gateway API is on the roadmap, but there's now that item is now complete, and so we can tick it off.
Yeah.
But is it?
I suppose maintenance will be ongoing, yeah. And
I see the roadmap as being, we put things in and we eventually do them or take them out, and so it's a dynamic document, which is updated not frequently, but at least periodically.
Yeah. What if we had, so saying like mission statement type things, like 4 core areas, and the roadmap is actually links to like the next release roadmap. So like the actual things that are going to happen go into the milestone in GitHub, but we might do the next one to kind of say, well, we're not going to do this release, but we're going to stick it in the next release, but then tag the things with like where they fit under. So just anchor sets might be tagged with something like core Kubernetes API enhancement or something like that. Something else might be tagged.
Apply. That's another thing. Sorry to interrupt you, Peter, but server-side apply is half done. I think Tim reckons there's more to do. We could add that to the roadmap.
But things like the developer experience, the GitHub milestones are only on the cert-manager project, aren't they? We could create a new project so that we could have a bit of an overview across like website, cert-manager, trust manager, and then have I don't know how then it gets complicated because not everything's 115, right? So sorry, I'm thinking out loud.
We could use the community project for it, for things that are kind of cross-project concerns.
Just generally, like you can imagine like a Kanban board where say Gateway API would be undone right now, and other things like cluster trust bundle is to do. Like at a very high level, like that would be probably helpful. And if we have that reviewed regularly and open source stand-ups, say that would be helpful. And I really like your idea, Peter, of tagging things with roadmap names, like so it ties it back. Almost like it immediately justifies why the thing exists and is being worked on. It's helpfully as well. I've been frantically searching for this whole call for a post Mael wrote about this 2 days ago because I couldn't find it, but I have found it now. And he suggests exactly that, or rather, Rian, who offered to help with road mapping work from Tag Contributor Strategy, I assume. They say like have the roadmap and then have a project that sort of maps to it and that allows people to see what's going on and what's prioritized. In fact, that's in that document as well. It's all coming together. This is great.
We could have more calendar-based milestones to not tie it to cert-manager or trust manager releases, like hard. You'd say 4th quarter 2024, something. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm conscious that we are out of time.
Yeah.
I think we've had some really good discussion here. I'm thankful to everyone for joining. I do have to get off to another meeting. So what I'm going to say is I might try and take a look at a really basic restructuring of the roadmap to reflect what we've discussed and try and get some stuff in there. And then we can work asynchronously as a group on that PR to move forwards with the roadmap in the community repo. I think that'll probably include like regularly scheduled check-ins on the project and the roadmap and things as well in the future. Does that sound fair?
Thanks a lot. Sounds really good.
Brilliant. Well, then this concludes the inaugural steering committee meeting. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to anyone that chooses to watch this. You're a trooper. See you later. Stop the recording.